Okay, so many people probably out there wondering why I took the actions I did the other day to climb on top of an oil tanker and get arrested in the process. And the simple answer is that I want to expose and slow down this fossil fuel death machine that has a stranglehold on our lives, and to expose our government's inaction in reining it in, which it can do. So in the recent energy strategy announced just the other day, the government said it was going to expand coal, oil and gas. And just a few days before that, the Secretary General of the United Nations, the world's most diplomatic person perhaps, described expanding fossil fuels as moral and economic madness. Okay? So our government right now is doing something that is moral and economic madness. It's moral madness because expanding the fossil fuel industry is going to result in global overheating going over 1.5 degrees, which is going to cost the lives and misery of millions upon millions of people around the world. And it's already costing the lives and misery of millions of people around the world. It's just very much underreported. It's economic madness because no matter what you think, it's logically sensible to suggest that you cannot have an economy, our society cannot function, our economy cannot function on a planet that has overheated. So the most recent IPCC report said, for example, that by 2050 on the current pathway, if we get to about 3 degrees of global overheating, 19% of the Earth's surface will be too hot to live on. Humans won't be able to live there, much less grow crops and do all the things that a lot of our crops are grown around these areas that will become too hot. And the pressure that will put on our society in terms of displacements, which leads to conflicts and wars, droughts, fires, the floods, all of these things will destroy our civilization. It simply isn't tough enough to sort this out. And the war in Ukraine is dependent on fossil fuels. For example, a company like Shell, whose tanker I was stood on top of, Shell has pumped $8 billion into the Russian economy since the invasion of Crimea in 2014. That's an average of $1 billion a year. That's a lot of guns, a lot of bullets, a lot of shells falling on the Ukrainian people. The most recent cost of living crisis that we're kind of living through now is basically an opportunity for these companies to absolutely rake it in. Again, Shell has recorded massive profits. It's recorded record profits, made £20 billion recently. And this is just unacceptable. Our government could rein these companies in. It has an ability, it has a power to do these things, yet it does not. Its most recent energy strategy announced an expansion, as I just said. And why is that? The British public, in the government's own research, so the research commissioned by the Business, Energy, Industry and Strategy Department, suggests that there's 80% support from the British public for renewable energy, onshore renewables as well. The government basically caved in and bottled it because of the opinions of a few of its MPs and a few influential people in its party. But at the same time, it also neglected to do one of the simplest, cheapest and most rapid things that it could do, which is to announce a massive retrofitting scheme to insulate people's houses and put new boilers in their houses, which would create thousands and thousands of new jobs, quality jobs, which would help us to transition. So it did two things very opposite to what is needed. It also promised to put a lot of excitement into our nuclear industry. Nuclear power, lots of people have their grave misgivings about it. I personally think it puts a burden of huge amounts of nuclear waste onto future generations, which is totally uncool in my opinion. But even beside that, it's the most expensive form of low carbon electricity that we can have. Some people say, and I've read somewhere, it's about £90 to £100 per megawatt hour for nuclear. Whether offshore renewables, offshore wind, costs £37 per megawatt hour. which is well less than half the cost of nuclear. It takes a bit longer, and that's why it's more expensive. But the cheapest form is onshore renewables, which is about £32 per megawatt hour. The problem here is that our government is too close to these industries, and so is opting to do the different thing. But you don't need to believe me. I'm not asking for you to understand and believe what I'm saying here. These figures are out there. What Extinction Rebellion and what I am demanding is that our government ends fossil fuel investments, new fossil fuel investments. So it could decide to do that tomorrow. I'm demanding that it ends fossil fuel subsidies, again, because fossil fuels get a huge amount of support from our government, which artificially props up this market. And I'm also demanding an end to fossil fuel licenses. But our government has revealed itself recently to be very untrustworthy, and I don't think if they were to make a plan, even if it seemed good on paper, they would probably find some way of making it wrong, making it bad, and making it not in the interest of ordinary people. So what I want, and what Extinction Rebellion want, is what's called a citizens' assembly. And a citizens' assembly is a collection of ordinary people selected at random, brought together to work together. So they're not in opposition like our two main parties are griping and grappling all the time. This is a group of ordinary people, a cross-section of society, working together, being advised by experts, scientists, and all sorts of different people who are the top people in their field. Ordinary people are given the facts, and then they would come up with a plan to navigate us out of here. So we're calling for a rapid but fair transition. So it needs to be extremely quick, this transition away from our fossil fuel economy, but it needs also to be fair and kind. And if ordinary people were put in charge of it, rather than people who are absolutely minted and don't have any interest in the interests of ordinary people, if ordinary people were doing this, because it would be a cross-section of society, most ordinary people would be in there, it would be free from the corruption, the vested interests, and the need for these politicians to try to get elected every few years. So this Citizens' Assembly seems to me like a really sensible way forward. I just want to talk one more thing a little bit as well. I've been criticised already for being a hypocrite. Yes, I still drive a car. Some of my clothes are made of fossil fuels. I consume various products here and there, but I have tried my absolute best to minimise my impact in all various ways. And I can go into them another time. But the problem is that you can do all those things, and credit to you if you do, and if you're thinking of doing them, do them. But the problem is, if these fossil fuel companies aren't reined in, then those efforts will not be fruitful. And yes, as an athlete, I had a huge impact. I flew all around the world, I did all that. But once I realised, and now I understand, those things, I don't do them anymore. And we have to ask these questions. So I say to people, look, don't be fearful. We're all hypocrites to some level. We all have a history, but we all now together, you and I, can have a future. And we can have a better and happier future that works for more people. But we need to work at it. It's not going to happen watching TV and putting the thumbs up on Facebook. It's going to happen by people power, by people like you and me searching inside themselves and deciding what is the best thing that they can do. It's probably 2 or 3 years before we have an election in this country. And even if we did, I'm not sure what will happen. I don't think our politicians are up to it. So I am choosing to take the route of peaceful direct action, choosing to act with the voice of science, with the voice of reason, and with the care and a sense of responsibility for all life on earth, people who don't know me, people who like me, people who don't like me, for all those people who are unable to protest for various reasons, who cannot be on the streets, for all the people who are too young to be able to understand what's going on, yet will have to live with the impact of the decisions that are being made right now. I'm doing it for all of them. So I'm asking people to think very carefully about joining groups like Extinction Rebellion to use their people power to support groups like Extinction Rebellion, to make them more effective so that we can hold our government to account. There's not one single person out there would vote, if they knew what they were voting for, to destroy their future, to destroy the future of everyone they care about, and to destroy the future of all the people who have not even arrived, and to destroy all the beautiful life and nature on Earth. That's just not sensible. So I'm clear about what I'm doing. I am very, very sorry to the people who have their lives disrupted by what I do, what I've done, what we do. That's a really tough thing to do. I don't take any pleasure in it. But I am not your enemy. These fossil fuel companies that are destroying our lives, they are our enemy now. And our government, who is letting them do that, has to be stopped. Thank you for listening.